Hello, everybody. My name is Emilio Garcia from Boundify, and today we have our webinar with Laura McPherson, and we will be talking about customer stories that sells. Welcome, everyone. We are really happy to have you here today. I think we are going to have a great time. I will let Laura introduce herself in a little while, but before, I want to make sure that everybody gets to know its way around the platform. As you can see, Laura and I are here. We're going to share a screen. And in the upper part of the screen, there are a couple of buttons here where you can interact with us and hopefully get great value of this conversation. There's going to a couple of posts that I will post a little longer. There's a section where you can ask questions. If you have any questions for Laura at the end of the presentation, we will be thrilled to answer them. You will have available the handouts of the presentation for later review if you want to. And of course, if at any moment you have any comments, please put it on the chat. I will be paying attention to that while Laura talks about or walks through her presentation. And I will make sure that the answers get, you get the answers through her, either today or after this presentation is available on demand. And without that, Laura, how are you? Welcome.
Good to be here. So I'm excited to share.
Great. Let's hope that this goes well. We have been practicing here for a little while, but
yeah, this is a new platform, so for me, so bear with us. Yes. And yes, as Emilio mentioned, feel free to go ahead and ask questions in the chat area if you have them along the way, or if you want to ask at the end, that's great too. All right, let me screen.
There you go. I can see it now. And I will change the focus into the presentation. Everybody should now be seeing it.
Okay, great. And if anyone can't, just again, pop that in the chat. Okay, so today's topic is customer stories that sell. And we're going to be talking through a 4-step process that you can use to make customer stories that actually get the results that you're hoping for. And as Emilio said, I'm Laura McPherson, a on-demand brand strategist and content marketer. So mostly I'm focused on SaaS, but other B2B companies as well. And I've got a few, some experience with a few B2C customers as well. Okay, so you are in this webinar, you are probably sold on the idea of customer stories, but there are a couple things I wanted to point out that make customer stories very powerful. For one thing, a customer story is your customer explaining and talking about, why you have benefited them so much, and it gives a concrete picture of that. Not rather than you just saying, we're great, our solution is amazing. And second, the structure of a story itself is very powerful just because of the way that stories work with the human brain. I think it's because of the way that humans have evolved. So long time ago in the past, on the African plain, in order to communicate danger and, communicate where food is and communicate about meaningful events and different things that are happening in life, people used stories to do that. One of the reasons is because stories help information stick in your mind more effectively. So for whatever reason, the human brain is particularly attuned to stories. And it's really interesting to look at the research behind this, neuroscience and brain scans and all of that, like what actually happens in a human brain when they're being told a story. For example, one research study was showing how a storyteller, the part of the brain that was lighting up in the storyteller, when they started, into the story, eventually the listener, the same part of the brain started lighting up in sequence with, the person that was telling the story. So even when you consider, alignment, a storyteller and a listener, in your case, the salesperson or the marketer and your prospects, super powerful that way.
I agree. I have now published a poll here for everybody to answer. And the question is, and you shared this with me, Laura, is do customer stories play a significant role in the content strategy of the people that is listening today?
Yeah, I'd love to know, how many of you are actually using customer stories as a significant content strategy, or, if not, if you're, just beginning. So I'd love to know if you're already using it. That would be great to know. And we'll wait a few minutes. I'll keep talking, and then Emilio, you can, I guess, pop in and let us know the results.
Yes, I'm seeing some answers right now.
Okay, great. So while you're, responding there, I wanted to talk about this quote, which I love. We owe it to each other to tell stories. I love Neil Gaiman. I think he's brilliant. And this is so true. Like, stories are so much better than just a list of facts. Because no matter how impressive your metrics are, a story will always communicate those metrics better than just like a bulleted list. Of course, you need to share, persuasive data points and quantify the results that you've achieved. That's super important. But doing it in the framework of a story is much more effective and will move people to action a lot faster.
I couldn't agree more. And when you were saying about, that human brain is wired that way, I couldn't agree more. I don't know if you remember this movie, The Croods, or right? I think it was The Croods, right? Like the Asian family, they were living on cave, and pretty much the movie hinges around telling stories, right? Who was better at, and as you were saying, conveying, danger or a valuable lesson that maybe numbers will never share in the right way. However, and I guess you get this question from potential prospects and customers and people around, is coming up with a way of, structuring those stories is hard. And I can tell you firsthand that, it's a process that sometimes is not easy to lay out.
Yes, that's so true. And that's why I'm going to be sharing a structure that I think will be super helpful. It's super simple, but it's very easy, to build a story around. At the same time, it's super effective. It's super proven. Almost every story that's ever been told follows this framework. Obviously, there's experimental fiction and things like that have no plot and they're a little bit odd that way. But most stories do follow this structure that I'm going to be sharing. So here's the agenda. We're going to be talking about the 4-step process, which is the first step is to identify which stories you actually need. Maybe you have some already, but then how do you decide, which customers to target and what to talk about and all of that. The second step is to build an interview guide, and this is going to help you in your interview. Third is to create a pitch kit to encourage participation, because this is a big challenge that a lot of B2B, especially marketers, face, is how to get customers to actually agree to spend the time and all of that. And then finally is the structure that we're going to talk through that you can use to build your customer stories. Okay, so step 1, identify which stories you need, which will help your sales team and move prospects through the marketing funnel. So strategy, I want to talk about strategy here. It's super important for all types of content, and customer stories are no exception. So before you dive in, I really recommend identifying, first of all, which customers you want to target, and second, what you want each customer story to accomplish. That will help you identify your needs list. So for example, let's talk about some different focus areas. First type, I guess, of case study that you might want to do is the use case. What problem have you solved? You probably solve a variety of problems, solve a variety of pain points for your prospects. So do you have case studies that point each of those out? Case studies are usually more detailed than customer stories, but you can create a hybrid. So you can tell it in a story format, but then again, just get that use case in there. And presenting in a story format also has the benefit that it's a lot more interesting to read than just a typical dry, use case. Second is a case study, a customer story that highlights your products, your services. In the case of SaaS software, the features of your product. So ideally, your customer story collection is going to include at least one story, probably more, dedicated to each of your products or features, services that your prospects or your customers are using in order to generate the results that they're achieving. UVP. This is also an important customer story to have. Most products are different from each other, that you might have, an occasional company that's doing something truly revolutionary, but often a prospect's buying decision really comes down to, how you do business or what your company stands for. So at least a few of your customer stories should really highlight how customers are benefiting from your UVP. So, their experience with working with you, or talking about the alignment between the two companies' mission, that sort of thing.
Laura, I got a question for you here.
Yeah.
In your experience, do most companies that you work for focus on the stories that they have accessible because they have been successful in the past on that, or are they more aspirational, right? Like I will pick the stories that I will think will bring the kind of customers that I look to have in the future. I don't know if I make sense with the question, but I rather go with the most successful stories that I have in the past, even if that is not completely aligned with what I want to bring in the future, or do they mostly pick stories that reflect where they are going?
Yes, so that's a great question. And the answer is, in my experience, they want both. So, if they have some stories where the metrics are just really impressive and, the customer was able to achieve something really, really amazing, that serves an important purpose. Even if maybe, it's regarding a product that they're not really promoting much anymore or something like that. But then obviously it's also super important, to tell those stories that are highlighting, the products and the features that, are upcoming, even if you don't have maybe, because a lot of customers don't track their metrics, or the person that you're talking to doesn't necessarily have access to those metrics. But those are also, great stories to have because they feature your, your product, a specific product, a direction that you're headed, maybe in a new industry, that sort of thing. So I would recommend both. That way you can show basically the spectrum.
Nice. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So the other two areas are the industries that you serve. Because, a prospect is going to want to know that you have experience with their industry, or that you, have experience in something related, because they're going to have very specific needs and requirements. You may not, obviously, especially if you're entering a new industry, you may not have specific experience in that industry, but if you have related experience, so you can show, how it applies, or if there are common characteristics between the two that you can point out, that's also very helpful. And then company size. So, obviously the needs of a 50 employee company are going to be very different from, a 50,000 employee company. So your prospects are going to want to know that you have experience dealing with the types of problems that their size company is experiencing. So if you work with a big spectrum of sizes, it's important to show, that you have experience with all of these different sizes. Helpful tip.
We want those.
Yes. It's a great idea to talk to your product team and your sales team as you're creating this list of stories. Sales is obvious because they're going to be using the customer stories in their sales process. But also the product team, because these people are going to have insights for you based on their experience with the product team, or their experience with the customer, and that's going to be really important to inform. Are you actually covering all the features that that you want to bring out, or the types of customers, that sort of thing. I think too often marketing, the different in their silos, and it's very common for teams not to really communicate a lot back and forth, but that's super important, and it can really help you as you're building out your list.
I love this tip because, I agree with you. Most of the time, we will try to work just with the marketing team. I think we are everybody used to the fact that sales got to be involved somehow, right? Like for buyer personas, that kind of examples. Mm-hmm. But the product team for customer stories, that's an interesting one, because it's true. The story is going to be how you solve the problem, and the best team you inform about how that happened is the product team. By the way, we have the answers to the poll already here. So 80% of the people that answer do the customer stories play a significant role in their content strategy. So that's
awesome. Okay.
Very well.
Which is why you're at the webinar. The amazing they are. Very cool. Okay. So step 2 of developing your effective customer stories is to build an interview guide. And this is important because in order to get customers to agree to participate, typically, they don't necessarily have an hour, or a big chunk of time to talk. So, it can be easy for them to put it off and that sort of thing. So the shorter interview, the more attractive it's going to be to your customer. So for this reason, if you're super strategic, then you'll be able to have the interview move more quickly and make sure that you're covering everything that you want to cover, and really getting the gold that you need in order to build out the story. For the interview questions, I recommend that you work from a template. Aim to ask around 20 questions. The number that I have found, it's not too much. It doesn't feel completely insane for the customer, but at the same time, it's enough to where you can cover what you need to cover. So the types of questions to ask. I'm not going to list all of these because I have about 5 slides. So the next category is questions about success. Exactly what they're able to achieve that align with their goals. And you'll want to match this with the pain points that you initially brought out at the beginning of the case study in the challenge section. Asking, how do you feel about your primary pain points now? This question can elicit some really great quotes, that you can use to describe Again, asking for an anecdote that describes the shift from before and after. And then, of course, asking questions about measurement, reduce costs, improve productivity, time savings, increases in revenue or growth, anything around that. And then I always like to ask a broad question, how has our product or service impacted your success? Because again, this is really designed to, get a good quote out of that.
Yeah. One comment that I have here, when I myself have worked on customer success stories for our clients, is that it's super important to have that mindset all the time, right? Because, for example, when you want to discuss success, you have to have a baseline, and sometimes you are not in this case, I remember I was not vigilant enough to, for example, have a baseline in the form of performance before we start working with the client, or how the website looked like before we transform it. So I think it's really important that if you are going to work on this path, that you have in mind having the baseline from the day one.
Yes, and you're not always going to have access to that.
Yeah.
So one of the things I recommend that I'll talk about in a bit is putting together a pitch kit. And in this, basically, it's just a preparation for the interview, but asking them to, here are the questions that we're going to be discussing. That will allow them to find out from other team members some answers to these baselines, because frequently the person you're talking to is not the person that actually was involved in the buying process. Mm-hmm. Especially, in tech companies, things move quickly. So, they might have started using your service, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. Well, the VP of marketing or whomever has only been there a year, that sort of thing. So, ask them to do a little bit of homework, not too much, ahead of time, just to find out what those baselines were. You can always follow up, afterwards and ask them, to gather whatever stats that you need. But yeah, that is super, again, general improvement makes a good story as well. But anytime you can include those numbers, it's much more effective because it quantifies and adds some, additional credibility. Okay, so here is the link for the PDF for the 37 questions. And it's ungated, so don't worry about me filling up your inbox. It's just basically a PDF of 37 questions that I pull from. I don't ask all 37, but just customized to the customer that I'm going to be talking to.
Great, and I'm putting that link here in the chat, so it's available for the future, and that's great. And yeah, I guess we are going to move into your third step.
Okay, so the pitch kit. There are many roadblocks that can prevent a customer from agreeing to a customer story or actually nailing down a time with you. And so your task is really to convince them that their participation should be a priority. And this is just like anything else, what's in it for me, right? So you're going to have to show them the benefits to them of participating. Another common roadblock is a lot of, especially tech companies, don't necessarily want to reveal the inner workings of their business. They don't want competitors to know what they're doing, or maybe all this could definitely be true. They're uncomfortable showing the public how much they were struggling before. So again, addressing these issues, coming objections, that's all the role of the pitch kit, is to persuade customers to participate. I learned this from Casey Hibbard, that's with a C. If you want to look her up, she has a whole series of resources on this. But I love this idea of the pitch kit because it's so effective. So let's take a look at some of those reasons, like what would actually convince a customer to participate. So what I like to do is to show to tell them that we're going to position you as an industry leader by you using our software or our service, or it's showing that you are forward thinking. You take your customer success seriously, and you're going to do whatever it takes to make that happen. Another benefit is showcasing the customer's commitment to excellence. So just even overall, you're not looking to cut corners in your business. You're looking to really, achieve that high level. And our product or service was a part of that. Also, this works on a very personal level to promote the decision maker's leadership in choosing a solution that resulted in success. Everybody loves to be presented as, that person, the hero that, led the team. So this can work really effectively. And then also to provide the team with a tool to use during, budget renewals. This is really, really valuable because a lot of times they haven't really dug into all the nuances of the before and after, or all of the metrics. So this gives them a nice little package that they can take, to the finance team and say, hey, this is exactly why we need to renew at the annual renewal.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, it's very important. Okay, so another helpful tip, in the email that you're sending the pitch kit, you'll want to be sure to mention those benefits in the body of the email, because then if they're busy, they're not even necessarily going to get to the pitch kit. So this is like your line, your introductory paragraph, that's going to get them to actually open up the pieces of the pitch kit. So just bullet pointing those benefits and what you're wanting to accomplish for them will make it, facilitate the process.
Yes.
Another helpful tip.
Oh, you have many tips.
I try. Ask who in the customer's company will need to approve the story, and assure the customer that you're actually, route the story through all the necessary approvals, because a lot of times customers, there are various approval levels, and they're nervous that you'll publish it before all those approvals have happened. So if you can assure them that, you are 100% going to follow their procedures and all of that, that can alleviate, any anxiety.
Nice. I will take the opportunity here, and now that you're mentioning this, to tell everybody that we have another poll open here, right? Is if you have trouble getting customers to agree to participate in a story, I'll let the numbers run and see what's the comments from the people in the audience. But Laura, in your experience, what have you found out? I guess one of the tips is related to this, right? Getting approvals. Any other roadblocks that you have found?
Yeah. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is, what to do about the objections, specific objections, specifically around, we don't want to reveal to the public, or, we're embarrassed, that sort of thing. Barring that, though, I really find that the benefits are super motivating, because, everybody wants, for one thing, I have found that a lot of the people that I've done customer stories for, the customer actually uses it in their marketing, because they want everybody to know, look at what we did, look what we're achieving, look at, how amazing we are. And in a well-written customer story will do that for the customer. Sure, your goal is to show how your product is amazing, your service is amazing, but it will also present your customer as the hero of the story. And we're going to talk about it a little later. But most people, they love that. They want that. And they're super happy, to share. If the customer is hesitant, so that's, where we're headed next. Typically, this is one of two problems. First of all, no time. They're super busy. Maybe, they're going on leave or something like that. You can always ask if there's someone else that you can talk to. Maybe someone else involved on the implementation team, or, someone else that's using the product very heavily, leading a team, that sort of thing. And then the other one is they're not willing to go public. This is the biggest challenge to overcome because in some cases, it's just not possible. Like they really are, dealing with, proprietary information and that sort of thing. And they just, it's just not going to happen.
Usually lawyers involved.
Exactly. Yes. The lawyers are involved and they're like, no. So there's a couple ways you can handle this. One, you can ask if they're willing to participate if you don't name their company name. So if you just say something like a large telecommunications company in the Southeast, if your customer story is detailed enough, this can work very well for you because all the details lend credibility. Sure, it would be amazing to have the name, but if you can't have the name, it's better to, have the story with all the details than, to not have it at all.
Right. And I might be off topic here, but and maybe if our friend Tim hear us later about he might disagree with me, but I think that as you present the story later on your website itself, when you use those words like technology company on the Southeast, that resonates better with how search engines are going to find the content anyway, right?
That's a good point. That is a good point. Yeah. So you always want to describe the company, but yeah, it's going to be found that way as well.
Yeah.
The other thing you can do is ask if the customer is willing to participate if you agree not to publish the story on your website and only use it like as a PDF that the sales team would send to specific projects.
Right.
And you assure them that you're not going to share it, within their industry, but only, industries or people serving the same target audience or something like that. If there's trust there, then a lot of times they'll agree to that. Okay. So sure. I love talking about this part because we get to talk about stories and a narrative arc. So this is where the narrative arc is where the hero of the story confronts a challenge. So in the case of a customer story, your customer would encounter a pain point. The hero fights to overcome the challenge. Your customer struggles with the pain and searches for a solution, and finally wins. And this looks like implementing your solution. In storytelling, it's the denouement is basically the happily ever after. It describes, what happened after all of these events. And in this case, you'll be describing the results that the customer achieved using your solution. So let's dig in. So the story structure starts with the hero. And I want to say this. So not every effective customer story has to be like challenge, solution, results. It does not have to be formatted that way. But every successful customer story will follow basic structure. So it starts with the hero. What company are you featuring? What makes them special? What's their mission? Who in the company spearheaded the search and implementation? So actually putting a face to the hero is super important. So it's not just, this big company, it's this specific individual in the company. That also, again, ties back into your pitch when you're saying, we're going to, feature you as the leader who made this happen. Second is to set up the problem. And the problem will always begin with an inciting incident. That's storytelling lingo. This is just the trigger that sets the story into motion. And in a customer success story, the trigger is whatever caused the customer to start feeling enough pain to actually do something about it. This could look like losing market share to a competitor. Maybe someone on their team got burned out from overwork, so they realized they needed to redo their project management or something like that. It could be a new government regulation that came down, anything like that. But that whatever triggered the search. So once you've described the pain, now it's time to really dig in. Because for the reader to emotionally connect to the story, they need to feel the pain along with the customer. So what exactly were the effects of the problem? Why was it so frustrating? What issues were agitated? In this section, you're going to detail the costs that were involved in the old method, the time that was being lost, other quantifiable metrics, but you'll also want to really highlight some quotes that describe what the individuals in the company were dealing with, because chances are your prospect is also feeling those same emotions. So when they read about this in the case story, they will identify and they will say, yes, that was me. That is me. Like, I need to do something about this too. So digging into the pain is super effective.
Right.
Next is showing the discovery of the solution. So it's really important for readers to see the hero as taking action to solve the problem rather than your company swooping in to save the day. Because remember, the customer is the hero, not your company. Your company is just the guide, the person that led them along this path.
I'm gonna borrow something that I read some time ago. You are the sidekick. Right?
Yes, I love that. Yes,
right?
The
So
sidekick.
You gotta make sure that you are there, and in some cases, you can position yourself as the mentor, right? The person that helps the hero develop his character to the story, but definitely the customer is the hero.
Yes, I love that. So because of this also, I want to say too, this gives you the opportunity to show your customer as really driven to succeed. And again, it builds them up. But you'll want to show how your customer came to find and choose your solution. So you'll want to ask, how did they find the solution? What exactly were they looking for? What was important to them? What were their buying criteria? That sort of thing.
Nice.
And then finally, presenting the outcome. And this is the fun part. Basically, this is showcasing the results that your customer achieved using your solution. And what you're going to do is you're going to back to the pain points and show how the solution eliminated all of the pain that you had described previously in the story, and it will share the numbers, the specific metrics that describe those improvements. This is really important if you have them. Hopefully you do. Not every story will have them just because the customer, for whatever reason, this is mostly true in smaller companies, didn't keep track or something like that. But almost always you'll be able to find some metrics. This really helps to back up your claims. So they experienced a dramatic increase in time savings. That's great, but how much? If you're able to say for example, a recent case study, a customer story that I wrote was for internal accounting departments, and their monthly close process took 10 days. And using this specific software solution, they were able to reduce that to 2 days. That's huge. Every month, time savings. And it's very specific. So not only does it make a bigger impact, it also adds credibility.
Yes. Who doesn't love those X's?
Exactly.
Right? It's a 5X improvement.
Yes. And here's another tip. Throughout your customer success story, be sure to share anecdotes. I mentioned that before, and quotes from the customer. It really helps to bring the story to life, and it adds that credibility.
I got a question for you here. I couldn't agree more to this tip, right? Makes it personable. It's about the person, not the company. That changes the way that you look at the story. Have you seen any trends related to video? I have seen, people using video to kind of like share that code and,
yes.
how impactful it is.
I'm so glad you brought that up. Yes. And I love this. A lot of times people will feature, a quick 2 to 3 minute video where, like you said, it's them talking about their story. So you get those really great quotes, and then you can dive into the details and actually read the case study below. Those are super, super effective. Obviously, more time and money to create, but very, very effective. And again, just like shoots the credibility through the roof because the person actually agreed to sit down and talk to you, and that says a lot.
Yes.
Okay, so we've got about 10 minutes left. I want to leave some time for questions, but I'm just going to briefly share some links with you to customer stories that I've written in a few different formats, but they all follow that same structure that I shared with you. The first is a case study, customer story for Front. They are a team email inbox software. So the link is here below. The second one is for Flowcast. This is actually the company that I was just mentioning with the monthly close for accounting teams. Link below. And the last one, this was a very different format from what was typical. So I wanted to show this. This is a custom software company. So the link is there below. And we'll have all of these, we'll be sharing the presentation, so you'll be able to access all of those links. So wrapping up, before we do questions, I just wanted to say another thing I really love about customer success stories is that they do so much work for you. So they're very, very convincing, and they also have a really long shelf life. Like, you can create a case study and use it for years, as opposed to blog posts, which are usually more, timely. You can also write evergreen posts, but you'll typically have to update them. And with almost every other type of content, it's going to require regular updates. With customer stories, unless your customer stays with you for a very long time and you want to add to the story, which does happen, you're not going to have to be continuing. Super, super valuable. You build it once and then you've got it. So for this reason, it's one of the best content investments that you can make.
Yes.
All right. So do we have any questions?
All right. Let's see here. Well, I'm showing the results of the polls. I
think. Yeah, I forgot about.
And yeah, I have a couple here. The first one will be, how long should a customer story be? Yes.
Okay. So it really depends on the story, the type of story you're telling, the format that you're using. Traditionally, it'll be a couple of different things. It'll be pretty short, something that maybe 500 to 700 words that people can knock out quickly. This also depends on your target audience. So if your target audience is not super technical, they're, maybe they're on the like the C-level, something like that. They just want to see business results. They don't necessarily want to get into the weeds. This version can be very effective. So something quite short. The other one that I find is, 1,000 to 1,500 words. And this is allowing you to really dive into those details. Sometimes companies will have two different versions of the same case study, a short version and a long version. Typically, you don't need to get into all that unless, you're dealing with wildly different personality types or buyer personas and your prospects that are going to be reading the case studies. But I would just say, really it depends on, what you're trying to accomplish with the story. There's no set rules, in other words.
Yeah. As always, it depends.
Yeah.
All right. We have another one here. Do you have any recommendation from Alfredo? Do you have any recommendations for how to repurpose customer stories for other content types?
Great question. Yes. So video can
Yeah.
be good, not just interviewing your customer, but also you telling the story can be very effective. Also, graphics, pull quotes, putting the pull quotes into graphics and posting them on social media. You can use those also to share a link to the case study. Blog posts, either shorter versions of the case study or kind of like diving into the story, but then stopping before you share the solution and say, download the case study to find more. I don't recommend gating those if you're going to do that, because that can be a little weird. But if you want them to actually have a PDF that they can keep rather than just, losing track of it. Or you can actually share the whole case study, in the blog post, and then say, if you want it in PDF form, you can do that. Also infographics. So this depends on the case study, but you can also create an infographic that kind of works through each of the 4 sections and pulls out some of the highlights. Again, that works really well for sharing on social. And it even just provides a different format for the blog. So like if you're sharing the infographic on your blog and then the story underneath, that can also, work really well.
Very nice. Thank you. And you kind of answer the last one is we were asked, do you recommend gating customer stories or leaving them on gate? And I kind of guessed your answer. You sound very pro. No, not gating content.
I am pro ungate. This is a highly controversial topic, and it really depends on a lot of factors. One, the nature of your target audience. How annoyed are they with forms? Second, are you actually using the data that you're gathering? So if you're actually using all of the data that you're gathering and it's super valuable to you, it may make sense to gate. But most of the time, like, people are asking, what's the size of your company? What's your role in the company? What industry are you in? Da, 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 da. And like, what do they do with that information? Nothing. So it's like, why did you make the person jump through all these hoops? But there's a couple solutions. One is, to make your form shorter, so that you're not asking for a ton of information, maybe just the email address and company name or something like that. The other that I really, really like is to gate your entire resource section. But once someone provides you with the information, with their information initially, then they have access to your entire resource library.
Right.
If you have a good marketing software, a good all-in-one like HubSpot or Marketo, something like that, there's many softwares. The software will track for you what pages they're visiting at that point. You can learn a lot of information about them just based on their activity within your site that's being tracked after that initial form fill. But it prevents them from filling out all these different forms every time and, oh, here it goes again, that sort of thing. So it alleviates a lot of that frustration.
I love that, and you are completely right. I think that nowadays definitely is shortening the amount of questions that you ask, because you have tools like LinkedIn and data enrichment tools that will provide you pretty much everything. It's updated all the time. As long as you're going to do something like having a conversation follow up through email in a consistent way, right? Not once in a year type of thing. And if you're planning to do outreach, then you go and look for the data outside and don't bother the client. And I love your comment. Your idea is, kind of like a membership website, right? Where someone has the membership not being a user and a password, but just having enough information to know that this is you. And after that, you have access to everything. I love that.
Copyblogger was one of the pioneers with that approach, and has done really, really well with it. Again, they actually get more conversions. They announced their results from doing this experiment. I mean, they actually had a lot more conversions after they implemented this. I think it's just, because it eliminated that frustration. And a lot of times, like, people don't necessarily want to be receiving a million emails from you just because they wanted an ebook, or a case study. So, really using that, using technology to help identify, where this person is in the buyer's journey and what they're interested in, and, making your emails super, super targeted. I know that's more of an investment. Smaller companies can't necessarily, invest in that sort of thing. But even just, doing as much research as you can on your own outside. Like you could probably look up a company by their URL and figure out what industry they're in. You could do a little bit of that. Your sales team could do a little bit of that, just to knock down some of those form fields, so it's not quite so intimidating.
Love it. Very well. All right. Well, I think those are all the questions that we have, Laura. And yeah, we are almost exactly on time. I love that. So I think it's just to wrap it up with your information.
Great. Yeah. So here's my email address. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn here. I'm happy, I geek out on this stuff. So I'm happy to have, additional conversations if you want to get in touch. Thank you so much for your patience with the technology today and us. And super, super happy that that you attended. And Emilio, thanks so much for the opportunity.
Oh no, you're more than welcome. I love it. Thank you for being part of this series, and hopefully this will not be the last time that we talk, Laura. I always enjoy these conversations with you.
Sounds great.
Thank you, everyone, and stay tuned for the next one. Have a great day.